The French government is moving from Microsoft Windows to Linux, and when I found out which distro they picked, I got really surprised. In this video, I'm going to share exactly what's going on and why you should be learning Linux today. Let's go. So this all starts with France declaring war on its dependence on American software. So on the 10th of April, the French government announced a sweeping plan to migrate 2.5 million civil servant workstations from Microsoft Windows to Linux. And this is one of the biggest moves announced in Europe. So why were they doing this? Well, this was announced in April, and back then there was this whole thing with the US tariffs and that kind of thing. And that really shook Europe awake in how dependent we are on US companies and US tech companies running critical government infrastructure for European governments and even enterprises too. This was a real wake-up call for all of Europe, and it really showed how dependent we are on these services. And if one crazy president decides that, yeah, you're not going to get access to Microsoft Azure anymore, then we are in big trouble. And this is why European governments and companies all across the board are looking into moving away from these big American companies like Microsoft, Amazon, and Google. But how did we end up here in the first place, and what is the problem? Well, before cloud computing was a thing, everyone was running their own services on-premise. And on those servers and the desktop workstations, you would have Microsoft Windows running. Now, when cloud computing became a thing, Microsoft approached these companies and said, hey, there is this really cool new thing called cloud computing, and instead of having to run all of these servers on-premise, you can just let us do that in our data center. It's much cheaper, and because you're already running Microsoft Windows, you're gonna get a really good deal on this. And this is how they really got big government agencies, companies to sign up for Microsoft Azure and move all of their compute over there and host all of the applications. And now basically entire governments are being run in American data centers. So it's cloud computing, but it's also the entire Office suite, right? So when Dutch parliament members are sending emails to each other, that mail is sent to a US server. It's living there. So all of this communication is living on a US server. It's maybe hosted in the Netherlands, but it's being owned by a US company. And the problem with this, or the risk with this, is the US Cloud Act. And as they say here in the article, the US Cloud Act allows American authorities to compel US-based companies to hand over data stored anywhere in the world. So here's what this means. If a Dutch parliament member is sending emails, either internally or externally, this data is stored on a server that is owned by Microsoft, i.e. a US company. So if the American authorities have a reason to compel Microsoft to hand over that data, it basically means that the US government has access to all of the data that the Dutch government is producing. And in times of peace and when everything is going well in the world, then this may not be such a big problem. But when you have a president who even threatens with leaving NATO and that kind of thing, this is starting to raise a few issues. And this is the reason why governments like the French government, but also the German and Dutch government, are frantically looking into moving away from these US-owned companies. So the government has 2.5 million devices to migrate. 2.5 million devices that are currently paying Windows licenses every year. Well, when you're considering alternatives, then using an operating system that is completely free and privacy-friendly and which can be modified to your own needs and security requirements, Linux becomes the obvious choice here, right? So this is why the French government chose Linux. But then the question, of course, is what distribution did they pick? But before I get into that, it is just very clear that learning Linux is a really good time investment, especially if you want to land a tech job. And if you want to learn Linux directly from me, I have good news for you because I have a free 16-hour course that you can get completely for free by checking the link in the description. In this course, I'll teach you exactly how to get started, how to install Linux, and how to become a master of the command line. There's over 16 hours of free premium video content in here. It's the same stuff that my paid students get. Check out the link in the description if you want to learn Linux the right way from someone who has been working with it for over a decade and who has helped thousands of people land tech jobs using Linux. It's completely for free. Check out the link in the description. See you over there. Now here's the part that surprised me most. The Interministerial Directorate of Digital Affairs is switching to NixOS. It has announced that it will leave Microsoft and move towards a free operating system that should be based on the NixOS distribution. Now, this is one of the first times that I see NixOS being mentioned in an actual government setting, because it's a very niche thing. There's very few actual big companies or agencies using it right now, as far as my knowledge goes. So I was really surprised to see them going for this. But this is not the first time that the French government is going to use Linux. Actually, the French army, or let me see, I practiced this morning. The Gendarmerie has run a custom Linux distribution for since 2008. All right, so they have been running over 100,000 workstations on a Linux distribution that is called Ubuntu, and it's a customized Ubuntu-based distribution. So let's check out what that is about. Like when you open this, then you get something called EUOS, which is actually pretty cool. Like EUOS OS for the public sector, Community Lab proof of concept for a common free operating system for the EU public sector. Very cool. So there's already a EUOS being developed here, but this is basically then based on what the French government is using in their Gendarmerie. But I was very intrigued by the fact that they are using NixOS for a slice of the government. So what is NixOS? Well, it is basically a Linux distribution, but the power of NixOS is that you can define your entire computer in one config file. So you can literally just write what you want and define it in code. And then when you install your system, then everything you put in that code is going to be there. That's the simplest way how I can explain it. But what this means is that every machine can run identically, and you can literally just build a full operating system in a file and deploy that to thousands or millions of servers from that piece of code that you have written. And that is, of course, a perfect use case if you're trying to standardize something that needs to be rolled out over millions of machines. Now, real quick, if you enjoy this video or any other of my videos, please subscribe to the channel. It's a completely free way to support me, but each of these videos cost me $700 to produce. I have editors that I have to pay. I have to pay for designers and everything. So it actually is a high cost for me to produce these videos. So please, it's a free way to support the channel by just subscribing, and it really helps me out. Thank you so much. And this is something that is very familiar to me in my work as a senior DevOps engineer, where we write Terraform code to deploy cloud resources, or where I can write Kubernetes manifests to deploy stuff on my Kubernetes clusters. Like this declarative configuration of things is a very known concept in DevOps circles. So the cool thing is that this is, of course, open source, and there are two operating systems that they are creating. The first one is called Securix, which is a NixOS-based secure operating system tailored for small to medium-sized teams. It provides a minimal hardened environment with strong isolation, reproducibility, and policy-driven configurations to ensure security and compliance. So it's really like locked down and defined in code what you want. And this is what this Denum agency is using for their own sys administrators. And as I understand it, this is more for their internal power users, but they've also created something called Bureautics. Yeah, Bureautics. And this is then going to be the example that they would deploy to, Linux workstations for normies, for people who are not used to Linux. Basically, the goal here is to create it's something for them that kind of feels like Windows, and that they can secure completely and easily by writing everything in code. And then when they make a change in that code, they can easily roll it out to all of these workstations. It's a beautiful system. So I am not a NixOS user just yet, although I am very, very much attracted to it. But basically the way it works is that you have a default .nix file, And then this is what it looks like. In the file, you would then define what you want to deploy and how you want to set up your system. So let's say you want to install a browser on each of these machines. Well, you simply define a firefox.nix file. And in this file, you can, first of all, install the browser, but also you can configure it. So let's take a look at what they're doing here. Here, for example, they're adding bookmarks. So they're adding GitHub, they're adding YouTube. All of these bookmarks are being baked right into the Firefox. And for example, here they're setting the home page to connect to a local dashboard, which is probably running on each of these machines. Here they are configuring all of the extensions, and they, for example, disable Pocket, disable Firefox accounts, disable telemetry. So in one file, they can configure the standard basic definition of what Firefox should look like on all of these machines. And this is, of course, super powerful if you're going to be installing a set of default tooling for each of these users. So this is all about building their own operating system from scratch. And of course, the reason why they would go for something like NixOS is because this gives you complete sovereignty, right? Like NixOS is nothing more than packaging a Linux kernel with a way to configure it and an init system, systemd in this case, and a bootloader. And it includes a package manager, in this case, the Nix package manager. So it's a very minimal way of defining this. And if you build out something like this yourself, you have complete sovereignty over the operating system that your governments are using, right? So this is all about getting the in-house skills of managing these operating systems yourself and not being dependent on a software license or an American company that might even get access to your data. And this is also exactly why I built my own Kubernetes home lab, where I'm self-hosting all sorts of applications like my own Git server, my own audiobook server, etc., because I want to have control over that data, and I don't need any American company looking into that. I want to have that sense of digital sovereignty that you can only get if you own the infrastructure and the applications that are running on it. And France is just going to do that on a national scale. But there's a little bit of irony here because they are hosting their SecureX code on GitHub. That's a free tip I'm giving you, France. Codeberg. Check it out. Now, does this mean that you should learn NixOS? Well, to be honest with you, when I first heard this news, I was getting really excited because finally there are some signs of NixOS being adopted in big organizations. At least so I thought. Because the thing, like I said earlier, NixOS is a very niche thing. Basically, every video I make gets comments of where people are saying, you should try NixOS, NixOS is perfect for you, NixOS is definitely what you're looking for, and I agree with them. But the reason why I'm not using NixOS is because I want to have my skills relevant to my career. So for me, when I make the choice between NixOS or Ubuntu or Fedora, for example, I'm looking at how does it impact my career. And my career is impacted by the Linux distribution that I'm using, because I can tell you now that I have 10 years of experience with running production systems in Ubuntu. Not all of those years have been in official employment, but I did run my own servers for well over a decade now, and all of that is experience. CTOs respect that experience if you can prove that you have been running this for a long time in a production fashion. So NixOS has a very steep learning curve. It's basically a whole programming language that you have to learn, and that is why I don't really recommend people to learn NixOS and start using it, because it takes you a long time to learn it. I've heard that the documentation is not very accessible and the community is so-so. So when people ask me, should I learn NixOS? I've always said no. It's much better to learn Ubuntu or Fedora, which translates to Red Hat. You know, this is a much better investment in your career than doing NixOS. But the tension here is that I think NixOS is the right way to do it. Using the Nix package manager, storing multiple versions of the packages on your system and referring to them, being able to roll back to things, defining everything in code, Like, it is the way to do it. I completely agree. And I've been resisting for years to get into it, but I haven't done it because there's basically no career relevance. And all of that is to say that when I first realized that the French government is going to move to NixOS, or at least that was what I was told, I got super excited because I was like, oh wow, finally now I can maybe start learning NixOS. But when I started doing some research for this video, I had to sort of manage my expectations because I thought initially that these 2.5 million devices were going to be running NixOS. Well, it turns out that it's only the DNUM piece of the French government that is going to move to NixOS. It's migrating 250 of its employees to NixOS, and they are now doing tests of about 40 Securix and 30 Bureautics workstations, and throughout the next year, they're going to be rolling it out to the rest of the 250. So potentially, this could mean that the entire French government is going to run on it. But yeah, when someone shared this with me, I was told the French government is moving to NixOS. So unfortunately, it's on a much smaller scale than what I initially thought. So what does this all mean for you specifically? Should you leave Windows? The answer is absolutely yes. You should leave Windows if you have any value for your own digital sovereignty and your privacy, because Microsoft is looking at everything you do. And if you want to know more about why you should leave Windows, you can check out this video over here. With all of these governments moving to Linux, there's also going to be a ton of work that needs to be done. So I'm seeing lots of job opportunities in the future if you have Linux skills. So even if you use it at home, you're already building the Linux skills that are going to help you land these jobs. So I only see positive reasons to learn Linux today. And should you learn NixOS? Well, even after all of this, my opinion hasn't changed. I think it is still not a good idea to learn NixOS if you're interested in getting a tech career and you want to maximize your chances of landing a job. Then I think learning NixOS is a huge waste of time. You are much better off learning something like Ubuntu because, as we learned, the Gendarmerie has operated Ubuntu with over 100,000 workstations, which is based on Ubuntu. So if you look at these numbers, statistically, if you want to get a job in the French government, you have 250 workstations running NixOS, and you have 100,000 workstations already running Ubuntu. So getting experience with Ubuntu would increase your chances of landing a job. And this is also why I chose Ubuntu for the free 16-hour Linux course that you can get access to by checking out the link in the description below. I will teach you exactly how to install it from scratch, how to install your first applications, and how to become a master of the command line. There's tons of free material here, and there is a community of over 5,000 members all learning Linux together. It's super active and it's a really, really cool place to learn and grow together. Check the link in the description for the free 16-hour Linux course. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.